Stupid. Really
Call to
stupid.
order.
Oh dear.
That's important. Stupid.
So,
As long as there's
welcome
one
to
thing
the
in there, I guess.
to the Board of Selectmen's meeting, February 28th, 2023, at 6:30 PM. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I swear it's just water.
So we're moving on to warrant approval as needed.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 24th as submitted.
Second,
I second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposed, unanimous. Community relations and
Announcements. 2023 dog licenses are now available at the town clerk's office by mail or online. You can go to the Town of Charlton website at www.townofcharlton.net. Nomination papers are available at the Charlton Town Clerk's office. That started February 6th, and all those papers are due back no later than March 17th by 5 p.m. Town election is Saturday, May 6th, and annual town meeting is Monday, May 15th. Excise tax bills are due March 8th. You can pay them online, by mail, or in person. If you haven't received a bill, please contact 508-248-2239. Real Estate Community Forum is at the Overlook in the Great Room. That's Friday, March 24th, between 8:30 and 10 o'clock. I believe you have to register for that, too. Residential and commercial realtors are invited to meet with town representatives to discuss the development vision of Charlton. And the news from the Charlton Public Library, DNA test and genealogy research with C. McKinney. That's Thursday, March 2nd from 6 to 7:30 at Community Meeting Room. New England Quilts and the Stories They Tell are Saturday, March 4th. That's from 11 to 12:30 at the Dexter Hall. And Irish Dance St. Patrick's Day Tour is Saturday, March 4th. That's from 2 to 3, Dexter Hall, and no registration is required. That's that.
And now we're moving on to appointments and resignations.
Right. The first appointment is for 2 full-time police officers, a full-time dispatcher, and per diem dispatcher and police department custodian. Letters were, first the appointment of 2 full-time police officers. Letters were signed by the board approving the appointment of the full-time Charlton police officers effective March 5th, 2023. Nicholas Harney, Richard Reddick. The board is asked to reaffirm the appointments.
Motion to approve and welcome to Officer Harney and Officer Reddick.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed, hearing none?
All right, next
Pass.
is the
Congratulations, gentlemen, thank you.
Next is the appointment of a full-time dispatcher. A letter was signed by the board approving the appointment of Carrie Sewell as a full-time dispatcher starting March 5th, 2023. Ms. Sewell was a per diem dispatcher and has been promoted.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next,
None opposed? Passes.
Next, the appointment of a per diem dispatcher. The board is being asked to appoint Carrie Kirby as per diem dispatcher with a start date of March 5th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Nope.
Nope. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous?
And finally, an appointment for police department custodian. The board is being asked to appoint Sue Ciarno as the police custodian. The position is for 22 hours a week at an hourly rate of $18.11. I recommend the board make the appointment.
Just so everyone at home in the audience knows, this is not a new position. This is actually filling one that's been vacant for, Chief, about a year, give or take. Yeah, so moved.
Second. Because Dan's tired of doing it himself.
Any discussion on that, or?
No.
No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none? Unanimous.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, next is a requested appointment for the Conservation Commission. Attaches a talent bank form from Jacqueline Nowak seeking to be appointed to the open position on the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission has approved this request. We did receive a subsequent application after their approval of this request. There is still a vacant alternate position that they'll be taking under consideration at their next meeting. I'd recommend, as per their request, that the board appoint Ms. Nowak with a term expiration date of June 30th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
For discussion, but just so that we understand that there was, the board, the Conservation Commission did vote to put Ms. Nowak in, and the other application came in after. After. So there's, and there is an alternate. It's the board decisions, whether, we had an opportunity to bring them both in and interview them both, or?
My motion stands. I mean, if the Conservation Commission felt strong enough that Ms. Nowak would do a nice job, that's more than enough for me. But again, I defer to the majority of the board.
All in favor?
I'm fine with it, especially if
Yeah, me too.
they had a time they want to make a decision by and someone applies
Yeah.
late, it does put them at a disadvantage, but I wouldn't go against the Concom for acting on what they had.
Yeah, correct. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed, hearing none. All right, moving along.
All right, next is a requested appointment for the Memorial Day Committee. Attaches a talent bank form from Franklin K. Gaylord seeking to be appointed to the Memorial Day Committee. The members of the committee have approved the request. I recommend the board appoint Mr. Gaylord with a term expiration date of June 30th, 2024.
So moved, and thank you, Mr. Gaylord.
Second, and thank you also for his service in the United States Marine Corps.
Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed, passed.
All right, next moving on to a few notice of retirements. The first, a notice of retirement from our assistant assessor. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
No, tomorrow.
I skipped one, sorry. Old Home Day, last one, for appointment. Attaches a talent bank form from Keith Scott seeking to be appointed to the Old Home Day Committee. The members of the committee have approved the request. I'd recommend the board appoint Mr. Scott with a term expiration date of June 30th, 2024.
So moved, and thank you, Mr. Scott.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none, passed.
Now, moving on to our notice of retirement. First, for the assistant assessor, attaches a letter from Janet Crockett, assistant assessor, announcing her retirement after 27 years of service to the town, effective July 20th, 2023. No action is needed by the board at this time, but for your information.
Mr. Chair, through you, Andrew, can we please get a certificate in the Selectmen's office for everyone to sign and deliver to her?
Of course.
Thanks, Janet. You've done a great job.
All right. And next is a notice of retirement from the deputy fire chief. Attaches a letter from Jason Cantera, deputy fire chief, announcing his retirement effective August 17th, 2023. Again, no action needed.
So, but another big hit to the town, so
Yeah, Jason, thank you,
this is,
sir.
thanks, but also accepting with serious regrets. Can we please also have a certificate for him, signed by the board, but we're losing some good people.
Enjoy your time with family, Deputy Chief.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. All in favor? We don't have to vote on it, it's just a retirement.
Unless you want to tell him you can't.
So we're making him come back. So then we are on new business, Lions Club request for toll road.
All right, the Charlton Lions Club is requesting permission to hold a toll road in Charlton Center at the intersection of Main Street and Masonic Road on Saturday, May 6, 2023, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. with a rain date of May 13th, 2023. This request was forwarded to Police Chief Dowd, who is in support of the toll booth contingent upon the safety precautions as outlined in his memo. Money raised for this event will be used for helping the community. I would recommend the board approve this request.
So moved with the appropriate conditions, and maybe they can remind everybody that it's election day too, as they're getting stuff.
No giving out signs.
So they have to pay to get into, they gotta pay to get into the ballot?
That is election. Yeah. I didn't catch it. Yeah, that's interesting. All right, you don't have to pay to get in. Awesome.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I made the motion, I think.
Second.
Selectman Singer made the second.
Yeah, yep. Second?
David?
Yes.
Yep. Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let's go.
All right, the next one is a request from the Worcester Regional Retirement System to consider adoption of Chapter 269 of the Acts of 2022. We've been notified by the Worcester Regional Retirement System that at one of their meetings, they have voted to approve the additional 2% cost of living adjustment as authorized by the section of law with Governor Baker signed into law on November 16, 2022. Chapter 269 further requires the approval of 2/3 of the executive authorities of all the member towns of the Worcester Regional Retirement System. It's their hope that all towns consider approval as soon as possible, but before June 30th, 2023. If 34 towns approve the request, the additional 2% COLA will be applied retroactively to July 1st, 2022. There would be no impact to our current assessment. What are the wishes of the board?
Again, for those folks at home in the audience, again, as a reminder, this is not for active employees, these are for retirees, and with the cost of inflation, I think, or the impact of inflation, I think is a good idea, so moved.
Second.
But for discussion, so there's no impact retroactive to the town. The state's gonna pick up the 2% up until we vote, the 2/3, or the 34 towns vote in affirmative?
So the additional 2% is factored into the future prospectus as to what goes into our assessment. So most likely, you'll see the adjustment as to what the impact is in probably 2026 and beyond. So it really just kind of changes the metrics as to keeping their accounts solvent.
Mhm.
It's not a, well, if it approves, there's a retroactive payment.
Any further discussion on that? Nope. Here, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none, so none. Passes.
Now for the fun part, that we've all been waiting for.
What? Now we're on the discussion on proposed Dudley Charlton Regional School District budget. And for you people at home, I think we all, as a group, understand the importance of education. It's why it remains 50% of our town budget. Clearly. But when we're taken off guard, and I felt like we were taken off guard a little bit on this one, when they approach us with a $1.9 million increase, or maybe now even what we're learning is possibly a $2.2 million increase in one calendar year, I think the board needs to get our arms around it and try to figure out. It seems like they've been talking with Dudley longer because Dudley already knew they needed an override, but our position on that, our thoughts on that, opening up to the board for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, through you, just for a clarification to Andrew.
Mhm.
So Andrew, what are we really up to now? Because I know we were
Yep.
talking around 1.9, and then I saw
Yep.
some numbers that, Chapter 70, I think, came around what they expected, or maybe
Right.
slightly higher, which was good.
Mhm.
But then our NSS got bumped up, so are we
Right.
actually up to, in theory, are
Yep.
they asking us for a 2.2 plus at this point?
Correct. So 2.2 plus is essentially, without changing the bottom line number, because it's, in the way that the formula is factored in the regional agreement, the net school spending requirement, because of the municipal growth, or the revenue growth factor of the town, has far outpaced Dudley. So essentially, the way that the calculation panned out, $300,000 was deferred away from Dudley and essentially placed onto Charlton just through the district formula.
So for those at home, for all intents and purposes, we're a victim of our own success, and I mean that in a very nice way. because our growth is higher and projected to be higher than our colleagues and compatriots in Dudley. I think they were originally like 1.5, we were like 1.7, or whatever it was, you know, I can't remember exactly. But basically, 300,000 got taken off of what they would need to spend and given to the town of Charlton. That's why the numbers went up from 1.9 to 2.2. So that bottom line increase, again, remains the same, as Andrew said, and again, I'm just kind of reiterating that under the existing proposal from the school committee, and I'm sure we're gonna have additional conversations with them, they're looking for Charlton to come up with 2.2 million to, for all intents and purposes, level service their budget. And I know there's been tons of, a lot by me and Steve and some others on Facebook around, you know, the different presentations, et cetera, et cetera. But for all intents and purposes, that's what we kind of need to talk about, is the board comfortable with that 2.2 number? And if not, what number are we comfortable with? And then how are we going to fund it? Because their public hearing is March 8th, I believe.
Yeah.
So I would love to get them some directional lean this evening on where we stand, because the sooner they have that from us, Dudley can react, they can react strategically, how they want to handle it, et cetera. So, I mean, again, I've been kind of going off on this a lot on social media and talking through it, et cetera. So I would actually love to hear other people's views first.
I think, if I may, another important point about Dudley and their,
Right up to the microphone, Dave, if you don't.
forgive me, I was just going to point out that another reason that Dudley is going for the override isn't just for the schools.
Good point.
They need the override town-wide, and if they don't get it, they're looking at massive cuts across the board in every aspect of town government. So they didn't necessarily put the override out there just for schools. They need it for the whole town.
Agreed.
And I will just simply point out also, I mean, I'm open, I would love to hear what the officers of the board, especially the new members, feel about this, but I will point out as well that if we were to give the school committee what their ask was, there is no new growth to consider for any other project in this town. I'll put that out there because it's not an opinion, that's a simple fact, and we can't print money. And, you know, people will say, if you don't give the money, you're anti-children. It's not the case at all. You know, we have a lot of other needs in our community that have to be funded. We can't just say, well, any new growth we might have gotten is all gone to the schools, and quite frankly, that wouldn't even cover it. And then we can't cover all the other needs we have. And they say, well, you know, schools help the kids. I'm like, well, so do emergency services. They don't just help adults and seniors, they help the kids. And they say, well, good schools help home values. Well, so does having functioning emergency services. Nobody wants to live in a town where police and fire and can't help you and highway can't clear your roads. So, you know, the Board of Selectmen, I'm only saying this to basically make it clear, the board is in the uncomfortable position, not faced by any other board or group in town, in that the Board of Selectmen can't just say, well, we want to take care of this child and not that child, or this silo and not that silo. You know, school committee only cares about school, frankly, and argue with me, I'll debate them on it. They don't care about fire or police or highway, and I doubt fire and police care much about school budgets, because they all care about making sure that their silo is taken care of. And they argue for it and fight for it, and we should expect no less. But this board has to make sure we can take care of everybody with limited resources: schools, fire, police, highway, town, everybody. And so when this board has these conversations, it's with that in mind, that we have limited resources. We cannot tax our residents into not being able to afford to live here anymore. We can't not provide for police, fire, highway. So we have to look at a big picture with finite resources. And I'll end that part there.
Andrew, are we still looking at around 1.5 in growth conservatively? Because
Conservatively,
that's a pretty important figure.
I mean, right now, that's essentially what we're using as our number that we're budgeting around, just kind of like as a 85 to 90% confidence level that we'll hit that number. But I think what we have to take into consideration as well is kind of the long term on this, because as we're looking at the municipal growth factor and looking at a 5-year average that creates that number, at some point, we're probably not going to continue to have Amazons and LNG plants and all this stuff that that we've realized in the last 3 years that has inflated that number. And essentially, if we continue that, well, we're just going to keep jumping up year after year, we'll run into our own cliff.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. Can I finish the thought? Or you-
No,
or you
no.
can
Go ahead.
So, just to finish as well, this is also, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is operating, right? So this isn't, when we talk about student-teacher ratios, because quite frankly, enrollment's through the floor. So this is not, we hear the arguments, but there's no merit to it. This is not about student-teacher ratios, and nor really is it about per pupil spending, because this money isn't going toward technology, so that our kids can get better positioned for computer work. And this is operational, and this is also not taking into account that if you walk that building, realistically, they're gonna come to us within 5 years and ask for a big tax hike override to build a new building. That is coming. So we have to consider, this is purely operational, and this is not something that's going to directly impact the students' lives every day either.
I'd probably just say in defense of the school committee, they probably disagree with you on that, but they're not here tonight, so I just want to.
Yeah.
I have a question. I have a question,
Yeah.
mathematical question.
Go ahead.
So that 2.2 million that we're talking about, that's based on 3.6 million that they originally requested as the number? So there's, so are they working on anything in
3.4.
between? Or this is it, that's
I'm
it?
sure that they are having the conversations knowing where our position has been on the 2.2, and knowing really where our position has been on the 1.9 before that.
So that is not final yet? We're
It's
still
not-
waiting?
no. There's
So
still-
this is just an idea?
Well, this is to give them direction, because they have their public hearing on March 8th, and again, I don't want to speak on behalf of the school committee clearly, but generally speaking, at that public hearing, they're going to want to have a number so that people understand. Now, again, that may change, but after the public hearing, it can never go up, it can only go down.
And I'm under the impression as well that FinCom has already told them, this is just hearsay, but I'm under the impression that FinCom has already told them by their recommendation that the school needs to make cuts and come back with a lower number to
Right,
see
so-
anything happen.
okay.
So even FinCom has said, you gotta sharpen your pencil.
But just for my logic, so that 2.2 is based on that highest of the numbers that would make them whole and
Right.
happy. Okay, and then, and that number obviously doesn't have the roofs in it, nor the high school improvements or anything like that. So that's my question. So,
Yeah,
Now-
so we'd be looking at least another 500,000 roughly for the feasibility study, not inclusive of the 4+ that town voters agreed to in the fall, was it? Or the spring? I don't remember
Oh,
when
for
like,
the
when it
roof,
was
for the
anymore.
roof.
Yeah, for the roofs.
And that's just the cost of the
Central.
study.
okay, and
Yeah.
now, the next level question. So say, hypothetically speaking, no matter what that number is, that let's say it's not 2.2, say it's gonna end up being 1.8. Either way, we have to go, the ways for us to fund it, right, is through the levy or the override or the debt exclusion. Those are the only three options that we have.
You could-
Doesn't
you
matter
wouldn't-
what that number
But you
is,
wouldn't
right?
so you don't do a debt exclusion for ongoing operating.
Mm-hmm.
The debt exclusions are generally for capital. You need a new cruiser, a new fire truck, a building.
I know, but could
But
we
this would be-
potentially allocate that money to operational budget and use the money from the budget that is set now to help the schools? Do you know what I mean?
I would say that in theory, so.
If that would make any sense to do the override.
So here's the way I think about it, that we're going to get in approximately 1.5 million with a certain order of magnitude estimate, up or down, based upon the 80-90% factor. So if any dollar above that 1.5 means we can't do anything else for us. So any type of fixed income expenses, we're going to have to, like the contractual expenses, aren't we going to have, so we'll have to make reductions. It means no new positions. Means basically anything operating, anything above 1.5, we have to find a way to cut on our side. It's just a matter of how that works. The alternative, to your point, is in theory, we could suggest an override for the schools, or debt exclusion for something else, like the
That's
fire
what I was
department.
saying, yeah.
I mean, I have my own personal thoughts, and I will absolutely give
Yeah,
later.
but
But
I'm
yes,
just asking, but either way.
basically they're saying, or what we need to figure out is, how much do we want to fund? Do we want to fund it within the allowed 2.5 levy limit? And if we don't want to, do it within that limit, really the only option, for all intents and purposes, would be an override. I mean, in theory, you could do a debt exclusion. I wouldn't recommend it, just like Select Person Singer said, at least not for operating expenses. But again, this is a good theoretical discussion, especially for those at home, on understanding the position that we're in. So I think really what it comes down to is, where does the board as a whole want to give directional lead on that 2.2 ask for now, knowing that I'm sure we're going to have more discussions. And then from there, depending upon what it is, how do we want to fund it? Because depending upon the funding mechanism, it gets real interesting real quick, because if you want to do an override, you have to do a whole new set of rules. If you wanted to keep it within, under the levy limit, we have to give direction to Andrew to say, so Andrew, we agreed to 2.2, go find us $700,000 in cuts, because for all intents and purposes, that's what it becomes. So I hope that helps.
Right, and then you have to
No,
decide, well, what do you want to cut? Do you want to cut fire, police, highway, town hall, close the library permanently?
No, but I think it's
These are
more
the
for the people
things
to
that we have
understand that-
consider.
Right.
Exactly.
And the public has to realize that these become real considerations. You know, and honestly, you could permanently close the library. That still
Yeah,
wouldn't
but
cover the
that's like
deficit.
doing the same thing that the school district is doing, right? They're throwing out the shock factors, so it would more like we would cut hours in the town hall and that kind of,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah, I'm just looking, at least I would recommend to the five of us tonight to come up with a number, knowing that we'll have to figure out the repercussions later. But 2.2, from what, again, I think we've all seen the same presentations, 2.2 gives them level services. Anything below that, from what I've gleaned, they make cuts. So
I'm-
somebody's making cuts somewhere.
I would add
I'm a
to that,
little,
though, that level services includes newly added positions that historically the school never had before and never needed and still doesn't. With that, because like you, I will make comments, but like you, I'll save them for later. I think I've been here long enough, the people of Charlton know what to expect when my mouth opens. I'll let everyone else.
Plus, I'm a lot more diplomatic, let's be
I'll
honest.
let everyone else make their positions first.
I think if the 2.2 was a shock, 1.9 was a shock, 2.2 as well. If 1.9 is a shock, 2.2, it's all in the same basket. I don't understand that they came to us last year with 3 silos, like worst scenario, middle scenario. Dudley voted for the middle scenario. This one, they're not willing to budge on. They're just like, this is what we need to do post-COVID. I understand the part about the special education post-COVID, and that's a 14% increase on that part of that. I understand that, that's not negotiable. I understand the increases in utility costs, we can all see that, at home. But if they're not willing to make any cuts whatsoever,
Let's also, Mr. Chair, not lose sight of the fact that in addition to increased positions, administrative positions, by the way, that don't impact student scores, right, or ability to do better and graduate at a higher rate or get into colleges, positions that didn't exist before the last 2-3 years. But we've also, depending on what time frame you want to look at, have seen a significant reduction in student enrollment. It's down 22 to 25%, depending on what time frame you want to look at. So
yep.
we talk about level serve and level fund, not the same thing. Realistically, I think if we, or the school, because this is actually up to them to sharpen their pencils, I said I wouldn't give it up a bit early, but only some of it. If they, in my opinion, cut some unnecessary waste, and I'll leave it at that, that helps right off the bat. Number 2, if you have a significant decrease in student enrollment, that's going to impact student-teacher ratios. It does simply by the nature of lower student body size. And also, even with, as you pointed out, increased costs, utilities, increased requirements for, special ed or special needs, what it's under, you still have a significantly smaller student body. 22 to 24, 25% is not small. So with such a huge reduction in student body, even with increased cost, you would think you could level fund, because much smaller student body, lower cost for needs, still give you the same amount of money to cover the higher costs. But we're not seeing an ask for level fund with smaller student bodies. We're not seeing even an ask for level serve at a higher cost. We're seeing an ask for increased serve, increased cost, all while we have newly created administrative roles and a drastically decreased student body.
Is it that because there's a decrease in student body, that's the Chapter 70 funding is based on? Is that what it is?
No, not at all.
So the,
It's a little more complicated than that. but
I
yeah.
should say that the town is basically held, or the school district is held harmless because it hasn't met its it's attendance ratio that DESI sets. So it's essentially, it gets what is the minimum aid increase each year. And that's, that becomes a debate as we go through the, the bill process. The governor's budget basically set that as $30 per student. Last year was $60 per student after it went through the full process. I know there's people out there advocating for $100 a student this year, but right now it's not something that's been really addressed in the governor's budget.
Something it's funny, they talk about increased cost per student, what you spend per student, and they claim, and I never bought into this, that you can directly correlate that to higher student performance scores, college admissions. Like I said, I don't agree with that. And I've had so many teachers, including very liberal college professors, tell me to my face recently, no, I don't care how much money you throw at it, the kids will get out of it what they put into it. If you suddenly spent $20 per student, the hardworking students will still work hard, the ones who don't still won't. If you suddenly make it $300 per student, the ones who work hard will still work hard, the ones who don't still won't. And this is coming from teachers and college professors.
You're absolutely right, because I can tell you that schools that are in receivership, they get millions and millions of extra dollars because they're just falling apart. And if you look over the history of all the schools in the state that have been in receivership, they don't improve.
No.
with like limited funded being poured in, so it doesn't, it just doesn't.
Yeah, Dudley Charlton students, they've been blessed. We have a wonderful school, and we do have some wonderful teachers. My kids went through these schools, in fact, just very recently, through COVID, right? 2020 was a rough year for my youngest, but they still get a wonderful education here. Our schools perform. But I'll go back to an old saying, right? Even on municipal budgets, fire budgets, police budgets, take your pick. Just because town A and town B spend so much money on a solution doesn't mean Charlton has to follow suit. If 10 other towns are mismanaged or have unlimited budgets, doesn't mean we have to mismanage our budgets because they do. And there's a reason I think Charlton outperforms so many other towns with what we have, and it's because it is so well managed. Not only by the board, by our town administrator, by our departments, our department heads, and our FinCom have made this town get through some very tough times without all the cuts other towns have had, and without just asking for tax increase after tax increase after tax increase.
Right. And David, I agree with you on that. And I've heard, and I watched the Dudley meeting this morning, most of it. I mean, I was walking away from it, but it was on YouTube. And they even said, their town administrator even said, well, Charlton's, just like what the school committee said, well, Charlton's going through a really good growth pattern. And the Dudley administrator said, well, Charlton's looking at $3 million worth in growth. That's really none of their business. We're not elected to work for the school committee. We're not appointed by the school committee. We're elected to work for the town of Charlton and do what we need to do
For
to
Charlton.
make all of our ends meet.
Right. And, we're not responsible for another town's failures.
Let's build our own school.
I brought that up, and that may be, you know what, and this is a different subject, but within 5 years, they're coming to us for a new building.
Yeah.
Then you decide, build a
No,
new building.
That's exactly
I'd
what I
say
thought.
2 years.
Well, no, I said within 5.
With that.
So you're looking at
To fund
either
it.
build a new high school in Dudley, build a new regional, but make it in Charlton this time, or do a new study, it's been 20 years, and see if at that point, if it's only a little bit more, just make Charlton their own. But that's another discussion for another time.
So anyway, how's our 2.2 doing?
So I'm not.
So what is the
I'm not
healthy
gonna
number?
support a 2.2.
For us?
I will not support a
Go
2.2.
for
I
it.
will support 1.7. So I think the schools need to sharpen their pens and pencils, get their erasers out. I mean, realistically, for me, I want to see 1.0, maybe 1.2. Because I'm not going to raid and destroy police, fire, highway, and everything else.
Absolutely not.
I have to balance a budget, we're required to, that's going to provide for every department in town as best we can. So, for me, 1.7 to 2.2 are all non-starters. I'm not going to support any of those. And I will not vote to put even a request in the ballot for any of those until I see them make significant cuts of their own, including a lot of what I see as waste.
So, Andrew, if you could explain the options between an override, I know that's the nasty word, no one wants to hear it.
So an override's really necessary when essentially, let's just say you agree to the 2.2 million number, and we look at everything across the board and say that, yeah, our new growth or in our capacity to increase taxes definitely cannot meet that number, so we need to bring it to a ballot. And I think right now we're in a very interesting time where, you know, we're looking at growth essentially conservatively 1.5, could be higher. You know, could be 2, could be 2.5. You know, and essentially, it seems that the discussion here is more around getting the school to come down to a number that well fits within the town's capacity to increase. So I think that may or may not be a discussion once we settle on a number and then look at at the overall new growth and everything else. If you say that we want to add or we want to do something on the municipal side in lieu of the town, in lieu of the school, then maybe it's a discussion with of doing an override.
Yeah, because that's the curveball I would throw in, is that since we first heard about any of the new growth coming into town, I've always been very vocal, saying that I want most of it, not all of it, I get it, but most of it to go to capital projects. This ask, and future years asks, and again, I get why they're asking, I do, but this ask basically says, yeah, no, that's not gonna happen. So somebody at some point is gonna need an override or debt exclusion. I'm still holding fast to my number one priority in town is building a fire department substation. That, hands down, that's not even up for discussion. That is my number one priority. Schools, yeah, close second, but still not first. So at some point, whether it's this year, next year, or the year after, somebody's going for a debt exclusion or somebody's going for an override. So I think on this year, we can probably, depending upon what this board agrees to, we can probably take care of the school request within the levy limit potentially. But that means any new growth is not going to our capital funds, which we purposely set up for this reason. So, you know, Andrew, that's the only curveball that, you know, much like Andrew said, if we wanted to earmark it
Well, the other
for something else, then yeah, we're okay. But I'm okay this year saying, look, let's find a way to make it work, and then we'll figure it out. Honestly, next year, you know, it's almost like a fiscal cliff. Like, we're gonna have a much worse conversation next year. But I think we can probably work something out this year. But, so I just wanted to throw that little
Yeah,
curveball to it.
part of that is also, if you actually were to give the schools everything they want, and we do love our students, if you were to give the schools, really, if you did, if you just did everything they want, here you go, well, what do you want to cut? Do you want to permanently close the library, because that still wouldn't close the gap? Now, do you want to start cutting a significant number of firefighters, police officers, highway? Highway runs on a shoestring budget with a teeny little team that bust their butts. I cannot believe what they accomplish. Fire, police, same thing. I don't want to put my own house fire out, God forbid, right? But I don't want to risk that on everyone in town. I'm not going to catch our own burglars. So where do you want to cut? So it's not that we don't want to support the schools and all their wants and wishes, but to Bill's point as well, and Patsy's, we're not talking about capital. This is an ongoing expense, including a lot of fluff we cannot afford. That, in my personal opinion, a lot of it isn't going to be seen by the students in the classroom either. So I'm not willing to jeopardize and put at risk every other service in this community, like fire, police, highway, everything else, that serves everybody here from child to senior, in order to fulfill a massive wish list that's just completely unrealistic.
So what was your number that you'd be comfortable talking about?
1.0 to maybe
Range, fine.
1.3.
Okay.
Yeah, I think before we give a,
You might nudge me to 1.4 if you have a strong argument.
I get it.
That's about it.
yeah. And David, you brought up so the enrollment in the school district has dropped 22.5% since 2008. That was their admission. And we all know costs have risen quite a bit since then and all the other things, but enrollment's down. So at what point, they need to make some hard decisions, in my opinion, and they're not willing to make them. They're
When
not.
enrollment goes through the floor, but your admin staff's going up, something's wrong. There's
Correct.
something wrong with that picture.
So what numbers are we comfortable with setting them back to?
I gave mine.
Yeah, you gave yours,
didn't
yeah.
give yours.
No, they need to come back with a sharper pencil.
So I think what Bill's asking, like, for me, I said.
What's
I'd
that
like to
sharper
see-
pencil?
Like, for me, it's 1.1 million, 1.0, 1.3. If you give me a real good argument, maybe I'll give you the extra point to go 1.4, but I'm looking 1.0 to 1.3. He's asking where you guys feel.
Yeah, my
'Cause-
number was 1.0, was 1. cut it.
1.0.
But,
The reason I say it-
but then, excuse me, David, Bill.
No, it's all
The other, what this doesn't include is, with this budget, with the 2.2 ask, if we think it's 2.2 now, includes, this year, their $1.2 million in ESSER funds that they hired headcount with, that expires next year.
Correct. That's why I
So
say
there's an automatic 1.2 increase if they don't do any cuts next year, so.
Yeah, that's why Bill said next
Yeah.
year's a big cliff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, next year's a much bigger problem for all of us.
When do you
Absolutely.
graduate?
This is
All right, let's go.
So far, I heard 1 to 1.3, maybe 1.4. Patsy, I thought I heard 1 from you.
1.0, yeah.
Roughly. Like, do you have a range, or are you just kind of like, yeah, 1?
About, yeah.
That's fair. Tom, it's it.
Patsy's an auditor. She don't give ranges.
And it's not a laughing matter, but
Well, that was fun.
you almost need to at some point, but the original, although Mr. LaMarche kind of denied it, the original number we heard in November was 3%, 1.1, 1.2. He said he didn't think he got into that much detail, but I heard it, and,
So where's your number?
So you're around 1.2, give or take?
yeah.
Pasha?
I don't know, I just think 1.2 is a half of what they're asking for, and without seeing how they can get to that number, it's kind of hard to come up with a number that makes sense to me, logically
So what
speaking.
we're asking the number is basically to provide them with guidance.
Yeah,
You know, they might come back and say, we sharpened our pencils and we only got it down to this. Well, we went further, you know, and then that's what we say, right? This is, people don't realize sometimes how challenging and stressful being a selectman can be. Because you sometimes have to make some of the most unpleasant decisions.
okay, but that's the guidance. So guidance-wise, half of it, but no more than 1.5.
Okay.
That'll be my
So
range.
I'm going to play contrarian for a second, because I think that they actually have a lot of needs, not even once, over there. I mean, I've gone through their budget, much like you guys have, and I get it. You know what I mean? And I get where we are. Next year, we're going to have a completely different conversation, and I won't have this tone next year.
I think
It's going to be a
you're
lot more serious here, probably. But I'm actually willing to go higher. Like, I'm actually between 1.5 and 1.7, because that will necessitate cuts on their side, 100%. And quite likely, we're going to have to really, depending upon what the actual numbers come in, we're going to need to shrink municipal government services a bit. That means no new headcount. It means probably some service reductions here and there. But if we're asking them to cut, we should be cutting as well. So I'm a little bit higher than you guys, but I also recognize that I am in the minority right now. And I'm okay with that, because I think that we're going to have more conversations.
I disagree. You're not in the minority. You are asking for a lower number. So
Absolutely,
you're actually in line with everybody else. The difference is, and where I would disagree, is that we're asking them to make cuts. No other department, not fire, not police, nobody else has come and said, hey, you know what? I want an extra 2.2 million this year. No other department in town, nobody,
They know
has
better.
come with that massive increased ask, because they know what it would do to the budget. These people, these department heads, make it work. I don't know how they do it, but they do it, right? But this is different. The school didn't come in and say, we want an additional $500,000, find it. They didn't come in to fund some positions. They didn't come in and say, we need an extra $1 million. Find it, please, to help us get it. They came in and asking for an additional $2.2 million, and ask unforeseen or unequaled from any other department in this town.
I know, but it's seven
It's
of them.
not the same.
It's 7 schools, so utility-wise, there's no comparison between, chief, don't get me on the driving.
Oh, I think it is.
But it's seven different schools, seven buildings, so it's 7 times more, that we have
Right,
to
but
look
we're only
at.
talking about what they're asking for us.
Right.
They're also asking for a lot more money from Dudley. So what they're asked for is a lot more than 2.2, a lot more. The 2.2 is
Right,
just what they want
3.6.
us to give, on top of what they want
3.4,
Dudley to
roughly.
give.
3.4, yeah.
Right, plus they want Dudley to give.
No, so I'm not far from you,
So-
like, yeah. 1.4.
And for the
This is-
people at
this is
home,
apples
just,
and oranges.
and for the people at home, just as a reminder,
On the cuts too. apples for oranges.
Right, but, you know, if fire, police come here and said, hey, I need another 2.2 million operational, you would be like, we can't even have this conversation.
But
And you
I'm
know,
not
it's
gonna
not cheap
tell,
to run a fire department or a police station.
but
I know.
I'm not gonna tell the school committee how to run their business over there. I just look at it this, well, in a sense we are, because of the budget. I'm just looking at it to say, what can our taxpayers absorb? Because I will go 100% formal right now and say, under no circumstance am I voting for an override this year. It is not on the table, and to the best of my knowledge, Andrew, correct me, it's a super majority for a debt exclusion, but it's a simple majority of the Board of Selectmen for a override? Or am I making that up? It's been a while.
I would confirm that before,
Yeah.
2 or 3
Well,
votes.
before giving you guidance.
At this point, they-
Majority.
But at this
For
point,
debt
right,
exclusion.
I have it written.
but at this point, they don't have
Yeah,
two.
at the
Because
town
I'm not
Only
gonna
half
vote
year.
for one either. So they don't have Mr. Borowski or me. So that's 2 that aren't gonna vote for that.
And again, that's just for a simple override request. So I suppose
Right.
what I'm getting at is that I'm not putting this burden this year on the back of the taxpayers.
Right.
This is gonna stay within the, no matter what number that we come up with, even if it's 2.2, I'll find $700,000 in this budget to cut. I am not raising taxes above
Right.
2.5 this year.
Right, so I think that's a different conversation.
No,
Not the number.
no, it's not.
Because
No,
what is the
It's upon the
1.2?
three, it's upon the 3 of you right now.
Right, but between the 1.2, let's put the 1 aside, but 1.2 to 1.5, maybe not 1.7, then we don't need a debt exclusion for that.
I would only
I'm-
caution to say
Or
that,
But
override.
they wouldn't, right, override, because
I
there
mean,
wouldn't be
override,
debt
yeah.
anyway.
I would just caution that that means that the municipal side of the house, i.e. our side, doesn't get any new growth, there's no new positions, and potentially there's going to be service cuts. But depending upon what numbers come in as. So,
Right, but if you're
so there's
projecting-
nothing going into our capital funds.
So I'm just gonna put out there, so
Yep.
1.5, because we're projecting the growth of 1.5. So 1.5 would be the number that we, hypothetically speaking,
For you, and I think
Would
Bill,
absorb
I don't
without the
remember where
override.
Steve came in.
Without an override, well, actually, I would say I'm not absorbing anything without an override. I mean, I should say, I'm not absorbing anything with an override.
Right.
That I will cut, if the voters want it, I will slash the operating budget left and right. I am not raising taxes above 2.5. That's just me. Again, I know I'm 1 of 5,
No, that was 2 of 5.
2 of 5.
2 or 5.
So, but anyway, so that's my long-winded to say, I'm a little higher than you, but I do want it down. But at the same time, I'm willing to negotiate, except on an override. That is a non-starter for me.
Yeah, okay.
So what direction are we giving them?
Right, so basically,
So-
they would need either, if it requires 4, they don't have the votes. If it requires 3, then it requires all 3 of you to want an override. to go
No.
forward.
I'm not
I
looking
think
for
we-
override.
Right,
I
so
think that's
override's
just-
off the
We
table.
vote on that
Definitely
one.
not this year, I mean,
Yeah, next year might be a different conversation. So Andrew, that's one piece of direction, I think, Steve,
Yeah.
through you,
We're
that
just
we
anonymous.
we're not doing an
we
override
can't
this
do
year.
So
override.
just,
Good.
sorry, through
Too
the
many
chair,
arguments.
just as another kind of piece to this, outside of the operating budget, they do have the MSBA.
The feasibility
The
study.
feasibility study. So they basically are gonna be putting it as Charlton's share being 500,000 of that.
There's a $500,000, just for the
Obviously,
study.
that's not
Right.
within, that's
Here's your
not within
On the
this.
top of the
Right,
request.
that's
Yeah.
not within this, that's not within their operating budget. They're asking, they have till June 30th for the town to secure its funding source for that.
Oh, do they really? That's it?
Yes, until June 30th.
Oh, of this year?
Of this year.
Oh, I didn't know that,
Yeah.
actually.
So,
So how are we doing that?
so they,
I'm being serious.
they've been in discussion
I didn't know
about-
that, yeah.
Right, so they've been in discussion about, coming forward with a capital override request for this. 1 year, knocking that out and essentially putting that on town meeting.
Did I specifically
That's-
talk about this
Debt-
last year and
so
said I'm
debt
not
ex-
doing
a
that?
So debt exclusion for $500,000 for a study.
wow.
To only to see, but that's still
Feasibility, doesn't mean it happens.
correct.
Well,
Correct.
that's thank you for, I didn't know that. So basically what that means is that this year they're gonna be asking for what their operating budget, plus by end of fiscal year, we have to find a way to vote one way or another on the additional 500K.
But that's only for us, it's not split with
Both towns need to.
need. Okay.
And that's.
It's be
part of
500
what
for
the-
them, 500 for us.
Right, so that was something that was unclear as they were approaching Dudley with the override, because it was, do they ask, Dudley essentially include it in the override or ask for it separately?
So,
So,
Mr. Chair, if through you, Andrew,
yeah,
might be a good opportunity, actually, for everyone watching, to explain to them what happens if the override effort in Dudley fails, which
Right.
there's actually probably a high likelihood it's going to, because it's such a big one. If it does fail, what does that mean to Charlton and Charlton voters?
So if the override fails in Dudley, the school has to pass a budget that aligns with what essentially Dudley can support, which would essentially be 10% cuts just to remain even. So I think between both Dudley and the school, they'd be talking about basically apocalyptic cuts, is how they're doing it, because they're framing their override for both municipal services and the school
As one vote, right?
as one vote.
So basically, if the school fails, everything else in town goes with it. And when you ask for a large override, and we know Dudley's history, I mean, 50-50 is being generous.
No, the
If I-
2018 override that they had, right, that was 2018, I don't remember exactly what
Historically,
year.
how many overrides has Dudley passed?
No, there were two, one in 2018, but that one was voted over, that was a big majority of the votes, the way that one passed.
But-
I can't
But there
worry
was
too
a
much.
That was
Historically,
1.1
how many
million.
tax increases Dudley passed?
Two.
Very,
Yeah,
very
well, I
few.
said it, yeah.
We've only had one in our entire history.
So like I said, I stand by 50-50s being positive.
So is the
If I, from what I saw on the Dudley needs, what I got out of that, watching that meeting on it, Dudley needs 1.6 million just for their override's gonna be 1.6 plus 1.2, if I followed that correctly. Because they were talking about that sounds about right? Yeah, so it's 2.8.
2.8.
So they're gonna go for a $2.8 million override, with 1.2 going to the school.
I think they
The-
should.
the-
Not my
the-
business,
the-
it's Dudley. but-
No, no,
What
no,
is
but
separating
no,
those-
What did you say?
but the school, with the state, last Thursday, when the state came out and changed around the formula, Dudley's, apparently, it looks like Dudley's went down to 1.2, and ours
Correct.
went up from 1.9 to 2.2, based on.
You know what we could do?
Correct.
If we annexed Dudley?
So
I'm
what,
just saying, it would bring our values down and theirs up, and we'd all pay the same for students.
so what I'm hearing is that
This is the
directionally,
chapter, the cherry sheet.
the board is, and again, this is just for conversation, that the board is giving overall direction that we won't support, or at least the majority, for now, won't support anything above 1.5 at its very high end.
The majority.
Above
The-
11.
yes,
Is that
correct.
including
That is-
500 or
No.
not including the
No,
500? Okay.
correct. So this is just the operating budget
Nancy and I
ask.
are both below 1.5.
Correct. So, yeah, in fact,
I would be as well.
Yeah. So
Because
three
we
of us are
be-
below 1.5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we were told in November, it was probably 3%, 1.2. Bay Path came in
what,
Thursday, Friday?
yeah, but they're,
It's a different formula.
yeah, they're
I
consistent around
understand it.
3.5% every
But Bay
year.
Path came in at a 3% increase in nominal, just typically what they normally do, and this one is 15%, or?
We're having all the budget, the same expenditures increased on their side, though.
You would-
know.
one
Well,
of-
it's also split up amongst a bunch of other towns too, which helps. So the direction then is to the school committee that they have to come in well below 1.5, especially knowing that we have to find a way to somehow fund, which, again, thank you for letting me know that, is that we have to find another way to fund a potentially $500,000 by June 30th.
of
Is
this
that
year.
correct? So is that a fair thing? Because the reason I say that, because imagine we're in the spot of the school committee. They're looking at it saying, look, I'm asking for X. I need you to tell me what to plan for. Because strategically, they might have all these other options. In fact, if it were me, I would, but they will have to get their ducks in a row to say, all right, what are their next steps? So that's why I think it's only fair for them, fair for them via us to say, get your number, it sounds like well below 1.5, or, it's not gonna happen. Is that,
Well, Patsy.
is that fair?
Said 1.0.
Well,
No, that, yeah, no,
Well,
no, but that's what I
Okay,
mean.
yeah,
ranges.
so median, let's pick the median.
Yeah.
2 + 2 = 4, not approximately 5. So
I can be great, but I'm saying if you look at that, if you add that 5 in, that I'm not saying 1.5 then. If I go
Right,
1.1,
I get it.
So
Right,
saying
so-
1.5 including the 500K for the
Right, so I was
study.
between 1.0 and 1.3. The three of us are all below their 1.5s. Is the majority willing to go 1.3?
Yes.
I
I would like to give them as
I would guess that.
explicit direction as possible.
Well, that's what I just tried
Yeah,
to
no,
do.
which I appreciate,
If the
yeah.
majority's willing to say 1.3, there's a starting point, sharpen your pencil, schools. And this, don't forget, this is above, right? This is extra, so an additional $1.3 million.
Can someone make a motion?
On top of 50% of our
Correct.
budget
This
that
is-
we
this is an
already do.
additional-
Correct,
this isn't just
correct.
for you. This
It's not
is
it's not a
extra,
non-education
Right, we're
discussion.
giving you money
It's-
and an extra 1.3 million.
Basically, to
Give the
give
direction.
direction to the school committee to basically say, look, we're not willing to go above this number.
And that has to be a motion?
So
Maybe,
moved.
maybe it doesn't have to be, but,
Oh,
I
fine,
mean,
I make it 1.3. That's for me, my limit.
Not to exceed.
Perfect.
A second on that motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
opposed?
Any opposed? Okay.
All right, so, all right, we have in direction.
1.3.
So, Mr. Chairman, what this means, though, is that we now have to have a real quick discussion, actually via Andrew, around what we're gonna do about that 500,000.
Yep.
Because that might throw a complete curveball into all this, because we can't just find $500,000 in cash. I thought it was next year, or some of the times, because I was hoping that.
I knew it was
that
this
we-
year. I didn't know it was
That we
next
could
year.
use free cash for that.
Can we use any ARPA funds? Do we have anything left?
We had, what, 200 grand?
Two,
200 grand, we have a
240.
probably about, I'm trying to remember what our free cash number is. but-
Yeah, that's what,
All
yeah.
right,
It's
how much
close
did-
So we could play with that a
Wait,
bit.
how much did we give away in grants? Oh, yeah, wait, almost what, 200 grand? 200 grand?
All right, anyway, so
Would have paid for it, we're
so
done.
let's,
that's okay, we have all those businesses supporting the educational foundation, which gives.
and just, all right, so at the end of that
I'll give
vote,
it
just so that people understand it, and
That's
this is
more-
my,
I'm sorry.
1.3.
my thought process on this is going back years, we had 2 failed public safety building votes. Those were, the annual bond payment for those would have been $1.1 million. So this $2.2 million ask could legitimately build 2 of those large public safety buildings in town. That's how big the ask is, just to put it into perspective. It's not, it's.
Well, that's year one, too, don't forget. I mean, it's gonna be
Yeah.
above that next year.
Yeah, and so, and this is not meant to
With the
be-
ESSA funds, right, I know.
And so I'm not being sarcastic, but this is legitimate. Andrew, what was the total amount in ARPA funds we gave away in grant money? And there's a reason I'm asking. What was it? 200,000. So, $200,000 we gave away in grant money, regardless of what side you're on. The fact remains, we gave away $200,000 in grant money from ARPA funds. Now, hindsight, we all didn't support it. That's moot at this point. Hindsight, we're very short in many areas. I agree with Bill already regarding, I'm not supporting any overrides this year, probably not next year either, but we're talking about this year. But I don't see how this board could have gone to the people of this town and asked for 1 penny in a tax increase when we gave away $200,000. That would have been almost the balance of that study. Point being, you can't say, well, we wanted to feel good and we said these things, no, we can't afford it, we give the money away anyway, and then go to the taxpayers and say, by the way, now I want to raise your taxes. Doesn't work that way. So that's one of the reasons why, like Bill, there's no way I'm going to support any ask for tax increases this year.
Maybe we can increase the permit fees.
On the,
That was the
on the
100%.
ARPA funding, and David, and you're well aware, when it first came out, it said this, we got $4 million grant, it said it had to be spent.
I'm happy to have that debate with you now. You're not
It had to be spent, the first
Let's go.
direction of it said it had to be spent on COVID-related issues, small business, all those other things. Then they realized, then it went to 2 to 3 other gyrations. We had already appropriated that
So
$200,000.
I understand how the gyrations work, and quite frankly, it's irrelevant because the money hadn't been awarded and given out. This board, and this is a fact, this board had the opportunity to not give out that 200,000. I personally made that motion. Mr. Borowski actually supported me on only supporting the first round and not doing or the further rounds, knowing that the town needed every penny of that. The remaining 3 members of this board said, no, we don't want to say no now, knowing we need the money. Just give it away anyway. No, you can't win this.
I
That's what
can win
happened.
this.
You
Yeah,
can't.
you can.
Tell me
I
that,
can.
tell me that I didn't make that motion. No, yes or no? Did I make the motion to
You
not
did.
give out? Yes. Did the rest of this board say, no, we're going to
There
give
were-
money
there
away?
were four- there were four-
It's a
there
yes
were
or no
four
question.
docu- let me-
It's a yes or no answer. Did the rest of this board say, no, we're not going to support that, we're going to give away the grant money? Yes or no?
The rest of the board said yes.
Correct. So.
Majority of the board said yes.
Yes. So had the board
I would do it
supported
again.
me and not given away that additional rounds and all that 200,000, we didn't have to. That's a fact. You are entitled to a different opinion, not a different set of facts. That's a fact. The board did not have to give that money away. The majority of the board chose to anyway, knowing we had important capital needs coming up, that no, we didn't know when we wanted to do the grants.
Did you know the school budget was gonna be $2.2 million when you said that? You had no idea. None of us had that idea.
Absolutely, I would do it
You know
all
what?
over again.
Again, so.
Even
I'm
though
gonna
when I
vote-
know-
Old business.
No, no. I'm gonna enjoy this, Mr. Cronus, because this is apples and oranges. You made a vote to give away $200,000 in grant money, knowing, Knowing-
It's an original, the original intention of ARPA money was
Correct.
COVID relief to small
and
business.
before the money, I don't care what, 1700s, they made a certain rule, it's been changed 20 times. The original intent of ARPA changed. The intent of ARPA, what we were allowed to do with ARPA, changed before the money was given away. Therefore, that argument does not hold any water. The rules of what you could do with that money changed before you gave the money away. You had it within your power.
No, not
Yeah,
at
you
all.
did.
No,
Yeah,
we
you
didn't.
did.
No, we didn't. Well, a majority of the board said no, David, so.
Exactly. Thank you.
Can we go on to something else?
Because you're
Can we
way
go on to
wrong.
something else?
You had the authority to
Mr. Chair, you
change,
can
to
just make
vote,
it go-
to
What?
not
You're the
give
chair, you
away
can make it go on to something
$200,000.
Yeah, can we
ARPA
move,
money.
can we
If
move
you're
on?
arguing something, you can't win. You voted to give the money away when you had.
A majority of the board voted to do
Correct.
that.
Exactly. You
Because,
just told me
because
that was-
economic development, what would we do without economic development?
You know what?
You know why Dudley, I walked Dudley's meeting this morning, they said, well, Charlton's way ahead of us. Why do you think that is?
So let me ask you,
Exactly.
economic development, how much of that $200,000 that was given away in grant money was given away to businesses that were not in this town? Or was
None.
Exactly, thank you, economic development. Or was given away to actually fund trade show attendance, chamber events, to bring business to town? Exactly, none. So businesses came, all well and good.
It was-
With
it was-
great-
it was- it was
with
more to
great acts.
sustain-
No
it was-
one argues the
You know,
merit
David,
of the request.
Okay,
David,
enough.
You know what, Mr.
We're-
Cronin?
David, we're gonna
You're
move on.
wrong. No, you can damn bang that hammer, that ballot, whatever. You're wrong. You
You're
don't-
wrong. A
No,
majority of the chair, a majority of
that's
the
not what's
selectmen.
being discussed.
I would like to
I
butt in
didn't
for a
say-
second and say that Mr. Singer started this discussion by saying that it had already happened and there was no point in rehashing things.
But then again,
And
so
now
he's
we're
going
all
at
it.
rehashing things again.
Thank you, because Mr. Cronus wants to argue the point, and he's arguing a different point.
No,
The point was simply
the
not
vote was
what-
tainted by, David,
the
we're moving
point
on.
was
We
simply
are
made-
moving
The
on.
point was
Next.
simply made, Mr. Chairman, the point was simply made that this board was given the opportunity to not spend the additional monies. But the board decided, and I'm sure this is on TV,
It is.
that the board did not, the majority of the board, did not want to have to say no to people they had already said yes to. Even though everyone knew there was merit behind the requests, everyone wanted to honor the requests, but no one on the board saw things that came down the pipe after. When those things came down the pipe, this board still had the ability to stop the grant money being given out.
On the,
which I
on the
made-
third, David, I'm done here. David,
No, on all.
please,
Watch
can
the
we move
videos
on?
then,
Can we,
Mr. Cronin.
no,
You're wrong.
I was here. I don't have to watch
Yeah,
it.
well, you should, because you're wrong.
A majority of the board voted.
Thank you,
It's
but
not
that's
just
not
me.
my point. I didn't say
No,
just
it's
you.
not.
I said the
Can-
majority of the board.
you know,
but
we
you're the
can
only
sit here
member-
till 10
You're the
o'clock,
only,
David.
we will. You're the only member arguing with me, Mr. Chair. I didn't say you, I said the other members of the board and the majority. The point wasn't whether you did or didn't. The point was that the board had the opportunity to not spend that money.
So for the
And
200,000.
now that we did spend the money,
David
I
noted.
don't see how it's.
Moving
actually
on.
taxed.
Seriously,
Thank you, Mr.
moving on.
Cronus. We know your position now, who don't want to admit you had the chance to not spend that money, and that's one reason we're.
I did
asking for
not,
tax
with
relief.
the.
He
the-
admitted
You
that
voted
he
to
did
give
it,
the
and
money
so
away.
did we. Moving
Correct.
on. Yeah, and I would do it all over again.
Thank you.
$34,000
Thank you. All right,
from
moving
businesses
on.
went to
Moving
stop the
on
school.
for the
Now go
200,000.
out and Raise their
Even
taxes
though-
when you're giving money away that you
Maybe
can't
we can
afford to give
put
away.
back the
Stop.
permit money.
There you
David,
go.
Maybe we
please,
can increase
stop.
the
We're
permit.
moving on now,
Please.
all right? Enough. We are going on to old business?
No business.
There is no old business. Then now we are moving on to BOS policy review.
All right. The first request is attached as a policy that Finance Director Ashley Oberzut is asking the board to approve. We currently do not have a policy in place for credit card usage. I'd recommend the board approve.
Yeah, congrats to Ashley and the team for writing this. This is actually really, really good. So, motion to approve as submitted.
I second.
Yeah, that seems, it looks reasonable. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Hearing none? Passes.
All right, next is BOS policy review. Enclosed for your review are the following policies along with recommended changes, if any, to each. The BYOB policy, policy on citizens petitions, civil fingerprinting for licenses, closing delayed opening for town of Charlton municipal offices, and communication involving electronic devices. I'll just go through quick on some of the changes. So the BYOB policy, the recommended change basically is a reflection of ABCC's regulations, just changing some of the wording under required identifications at application. The citizens petition,
Yeah, it's not changing.
no change to that. For civil fingerprinting for licenses, this was reviewed by the chief. He's actually recommending deleting the entire policy as it's no longer relevant. And beyond that, the closing delays of municipal offices. We noted in 2.2, it said you had up to 2 days to get back to your supervisor.
Which is right.
That should be hours. Just some formatting issues over on 3.3.
I think that's it, right?
And under section 5, we had two paragraphs that kind of had similar
yeah.
but duplicative language. We just deleted one of those. And no change to the communication involving electronic devices policy.
Cool. If it pleases the board, I'll make a motion to approve all as submitted, and that's inclusive of the deletion of the entire policy regarding the civil fingerprinting.
I second your motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm good.
Hearing none? Passes. And now, student select person report. You got a good little taste of town government there tonight, there, buddy.
All right, let's
We-
play.
To be honest, we may or may not have been putting on our show for you, just for your benefit. Probably not, but.
Probably not.
But go right ahead.
Oh dear. All right, let's play how many dates can Harry rattle off in 2 minutes. Tuesday, March 7th will be an early release day for students in grades 5 through 8 as parent-teacher conferences for those grades will be held that afternoon. Additionally, Thursday, March 9th will be an early release day for students in grades 9 through 12 with parent-teacher conferences for those grades being held that afternoon. The spring SAT at Shepherd Hill will be held May 6th, 2023. The deadline to register for this is April 7th. Additionally, a complete SAT preparation course will be held on Tuesdays and Thursdays starting March 21st and continuing through the SAT itself. The deadline to sign up is Friday, March 17th, and a payment of $299 must be made out to the school in order to attend.
Are you taking it this year, Harry?
I am not. I have something on Thursdays that conflicts with it.
Yeah, tough love.
Online registration for spring sports at Shepherd Hill is now open. The link to sign up can be found on the school's website, and sign-ups close this Friday, March 3rd. Those attending the 2024 Global Awareness trip to Spain, Portugal, and Gibraltar, the informational meeting that was scheduled to take place on February 28th, concurrent with this meeting, has been rescheduled due to weather conditions. It will take place next Tuesday, March 7th at 6:30 p.m. in the Shepherd Hill Auditorium. So I could actually go to it now. Like, congratulations to the Shepherd Hill varsity cheerleaders who won their league and division championships and are moving on to their regional competition, which will take place this Sunday, March 5th. The ASVAB, a multiple aptitude test that measures developed abilities and helps predict future academic and occupational success in the military, is coming to Shepherd Hill. There is no fee to take the ASVAB, however limited spots are available. The test will be held Tuesday, March 21st. And we've talked this subject to death already, but I'm speaking from within the system. I agree that we need to find a compromise solution and that $2.2 million is in all likelihood entirely unrealistic. But teachers were cut last year. Teachers are going to be cut this year. It's looking like no matter what happens, teachers are going to be cut this year. And there's no good options for anything. No one wants to cut anything. But the downward trend that I'm noticing is worrying, and there is a pervasive sense of fear that I've noticed among the majority of my social circles. So I just keep that in mind, I think.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way,
Very
nice letter to the editor you wrote.
Oh,
That
you
was good.
noticed that?
Yeah, I noticed these things.
Bill
Thank
Reeves.
you.
Nice job, and congratulations to the Shepherd Hill varsity cheerleaders. Nice job.
Thank you.
Nice job, Harry. And the town administrators report.
If you talk about the school budget, I'll fire
I-
you. I swear to God.
I'm just gonna
No,
say
it's-
March 16th, that was one thing I didn't add in. They have invited you guys to a workshop discussion, so let me know if anybody's interested on just whether or not I have to post that as a meeting.
What is that, a Wednesday?
Thursday,
Thursday?
yeah.
Let me look. Thank you.
Okay. Fire substation update, committee has selected a preferred firm and is in the process of negotiating a fee for service under the proposed scope of work. They'll be discussing the proposal at their next meeting, which may require further action from the Board of Selectmen, so just as a heads up to everybody. The Board of Health has obtained a new EV, which is the first electronic vehicle for the town of Charlton. It's actually an E350 transit van that will be used for inspections and for mobile vaccinations. We're gonna be working with National Grid on incentives to see if we can add a secondary dedicated charging station behind Town Hall, primarily for municipal vehicles, as, potentially these types of vehicles continue to be incentivized. And then finally, Government Study Committee. The Government Study Committee has been working diligently on reviewing and preparing recommendations on potential changes to municipal governance. Now, with the impending retirement of DPW Director Jerry Foskett, the committee would like to meet with the Board of Selectmen to discuss the future structure of the department in preparation of hiring a successor for the position. The committee has invited the board to their March 21st, it's a Tuesday night, at 6 o'clock right here. So, invitation out to you guys.
Thanks. I'll do my best to make it.
Yeah,
Actually,
that-
it's funny,
that
because
sounds like a good
that was all my list of things to ask about, like,
Yeah.
because it's what? When was it
August.
leaving? August, yeah.
Yeah, so what I'd like
we
to
got
do
like
is-
5 months, right? 6 months?
I think it's a good kind of plan of action is to have that meeting with
Yeah.
them, come to some consensus as to the overall direction, and just as we're considering applicants for the
Yep.
position, essentially say, this is the direction that it's going, are you a good fit to guide the department in that direction?
Makes sense to me.
What time is that March 16th, Andrew?
March
know?
16th,
that's a
five
school committee.
thirty.
Oh, so that's like 7.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 5:30?
5:30 is when they were looking, but I think there's
Yeah,
flexibility with time.
I
depending
definitely can't
on-
do 5:30, but.
Okay. If 6 works better, I can reach back out to them. It was just the day
Yeah.
which was the
What
most
day of the
important.
week is
Let me look at my schedule, I'll let you know.
Okay.
I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
That Old Hope Day date change, did you
Yes.
put any thought into it? This is something that has to go through us, because I wanna.
I guess I'll defer to the board as to whether or not you want to weigh in on it. I mean, you appoint a committee that essentially dictates all of the things that go into Old Home Day, whether or not that includes the date that it's held.
I guess there was a concern because that's been happening the same date for 100 years, literally, so it's a big deal, I guess, for the town. I just wanna make sure that this is
Would
good
you
with
like to
everybody.
me to add this to a future board discussion and invite the Old Home Day Committee in to discuss
Yeah,
it?
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I
Because
don't
we
know
have
what
to
you're talking
print
about, so
stuff, you know,
Do
we
we
into
wanna
that,
change
we
it
engaging.
to Sunday versus Monday and make it, Monday the rain day?
Oh, cool.
So,
Yeah, bring it in, okay.
Okay, we'll add it
We'll
to
talk about
the next agenda.
No, because it goes on the printouts and.
Oh, I get it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the only, Dan would need to be there as well, because if it's, yes,
You miss
Dan.
them.
Yeah, no, yeah, it would make sense, because as far as additional expense to the town, the only one I could see would be PD maybe having to stand
We are not
around for-
voting members or anything like that, but they just wanted to make sure that this is not something.
Fire, 2 points, small, very small. role.
Fire as well, no fire EMS. I like that.
Fireworks on Saturday.
But-
We'll
but-
change
but-
that.
The hard part is if they would do like the road race a separate day, requires people in the ambulance and such, so as long as they do it the same day, whatever day they do it,
Yeah.
we'll make it
Whatever.
work.
I think they're pretty early on in that schedule, but if they hold it on, the fireworks on Saturday, and then Old Home Day on Sunday, but then if it rains on Sunday, that you have to have your people available standing by for 3 days.
Yeah, we need to know a date, and obviously if they canceled within a couple hours before it kicked off, I could get out of it.
The race, I don't really think Old Home Day's even touched, even.
I just-
It has
My
even,
need to let them know
understanding is
that's
the race is going
okay.
to be the same day, whatever day they decide to do Old
Yeah.
Home Day.
I don't think they figured that part out yet. but
Fireworks, you obviously need to do the night before, and that also.
It's a good idea to bring
Yeah,
it in.
this is number 3,000 on like my priority list, so yeah, just bring them in. I'll-
No, I know,
I know,
no,
but that's
I
a
know, yeah,
cost.
I know, but.
Hear about as to why they want to recommend it just for,
Yeah.
so, for the next meeting.
And other business unknown at time of posting.
I'm good.
I don't think we have any. Nope. We can pass right over that one. Next meeting announcement is the Board of Selectmen regular meeting, March 14th, 2023.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session under MGL Chapter 38, Section 21A, Number 3, discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, opioid litigation. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, the chair so declares, and to reconvene in open session for any other business if needed, and to adjourn.
Second on that, Basha? Is there a second on that motion?
We have the roll call.
Roll call.
Oh,
No,
was
no,
there
I
a
know.
second?
Oh,
Is there-
second, sorry.
Basha?
Aye.
Patsy?
Aye.
Chair says aye.
Aye.
Bill? David? Aye.
Oh, did we have a chat question? Is there a
I
chat
think
question?
that's back to,
Oh, I feel bad.
yeah.
Where's your, oh, did we get all these? Is there also money for the roofs? Yes. Free cash and ice is already overspent. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we answered all of them.
Except
Yeah.
the roofs are in that.
Well, the
are
roof.
Yeah,
the
so-
roof- Yeah, no, we can answer the roof,
Yeah.
yeah. That one's already was voted on last fall in September, October timeframe. And now we just have to, we're on for town of Charlton is on for $4.5 million for the roof and some,
Communications,
high-tech.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we allocated 1.5 million from the ARPA fund, so the rest will be borrowed within the levy limit. At least that's the plan.
That is the plan,
Yeah.
unless
Something-
further consideration
Yeah.
is taken by the board.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Karen, I hope that helps. And I think that was the rest of them. The exclusion override doesn't want to last forever, yes. Overrides do last forever, exclusions fall off. We'll see what that happens. Karen, we took care of yours. And Ashley, thank you very much. Cool, we're good. So anyway, yeah, I think we're good for executive session.
Okay, very good.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Chiefs. Thanks, Eric.